The one thing I wanted to give everybody was the framework to think through their existing life without spending a dollar, where they were creating lack of time, right? Like that's why I call them the time assassins. You don't have to spend a dollar to solve some of these issues because they're self-inflicted, right?
Yep.
And you talked about the saver. I mean, I see people all the time walk over dollars to pick up pennies, like all the time.
This is the Business of Advice podcast, where we help good advisors become great business owners.
We have got a great episode coming to you today. So many of my advisor friends that listen, this is going to be just speaking your language. We are welcoming Dan Martell to the Business of Advice. A little background, Dan is an award-winning Canadian entrepreneur, actually really good friends with my buddy Brad Peterson, who a lot of you have heard on the podcast also. Has had multiple successful exits from his business. Today is an investor and coach to over 1,000 plus SaaS founders. Also, and this is, we're going to talk a lot about it. Everyone, I know I always say you should go pick up their book. I'm telling you, this one you want to go pick up. His Wall Street Journal bestselling book, Buy Back Your Time. And that's what we're going to spend a lot of time talking about, because it's the conversation I have with so many of our advisor friends that are entrepreneurs, is how they can create more freedom in their life. So Dan, glad to connect finally. I gave Brad a hard time that he hadn't connected us earlier. So
That's the crazy part. I mean, when I found out that we have, and honestly, like Joey Coleman and so many others we've had on the pod, I'm like, guys, why didn't you introduce me to Cody? Like, it's an honor to be here, and I'm committed to give it 110%.
Yeah, glad to have you. And we should probably shout out Rory Vaden, because Rory made that connection. Rory's the ultimate connector, so he's done a great job. Well, let's start. If you're okay starting here, you've got what I would say is an awesome background story, right? Your path to becoming a world-class entrepreneur is unique, I guess you would say. So do you mind maybe just starting there, like kind of how life started for you and then getting into this world of entrepreneurship?
Totally. And what's fun for me is, when I'm giving keynotes, I always ask anybody in the crowd if they've ever, been to jail twice, stolen a car, almost taken their lives, and they're like, no hands go up, and I'm like, am I the only one? And they're like, what the heck? Like, who is this guy? But that's my journey. I went through a lot of stuff as a teenager, and my life spiraled out of control. Diagnosed with ADHD. And what changed for me was I had this guard in prison named Brian sit me down, and for no reason other than he just felt like I needed to hear these words, he asked me why I was in jail at the time, and I told him I stole a car and drugs, and he's like, no, not that. He goes, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I got in a fight with Kurt because he'd just taken me out of solitary confinement where I'd spent 3 days, and he's like, I don't get it. I've seen kids come and go. I've been here for 10 years, and you don't act like the rest of them. You try to stay out of trouble and do your thing. And he said, if you've never heard this before, I believe in you, and you don't belong here. And there was just something about the way he said it. And maybe there was other adults over the years that had shared that sentiment, but there was just something about the way he said it that just clicked for me. And I thought, this was my thinking. If Brian sees this, and he would know. And at the time where we were at, I wasn't supposed to be there. He brought me into the guard unit. And he could get in a lot of trouble for having me there. I thought maybe he's right. And that began a journey for me of kind of reevaluating my decisions, and tried to get into a kind of like a closed custody rehab center that was available where I grew up. And it took a few months, but eventually I got released to this place. And, average kid does about 6 months in therapy. I did 11 months. So I had some deep trauma through, some deep issues. But it was actually that facility saved my life. It helped me understand my emotions and the challenges, and rebuild the trust that I'd lost with my parents. My parents just couldn't figure out how to deal with the energy that I had and the bad decisions I was making. And it was at the end of that program that I was helping Rick, the maintenance guy, clean out one of the cabins on property, because it was built on an old church camp. And in one of the rooms was this old 486 computer and a yellow book on Java programming sitting next to it. And for whatever reason, it spoke to me. And we didn't grow up with a computer.
Yeah.
And I just opened up the book and followed, chapter 1 of this computer programming book. And 20 minutes later, I got the computer to say, hello, world. And whether it was justified or not, I thought maybe I was a computer genius. Like maybe there was something about my brain that worked a little different. Like, how did I get this thing to do that? And it turns out, it's kind of like 101 level programming. All books start that way. But for whatever reason, I just decided that was going to be my new obsession. And I went all in. I got out, and this is 97, and discovered this small thing called the internet, and haven't looked back since. I mean, that's been my world. And, I've always dreamed of writing a book. That's what's crazy about this book is like, I thought someday I'll write a book, but it never felt like needed. I've built and exited companies. I've invested in over 100 companies. I have $100 million holdco where we buy software companies. So the personal brand wasn't really first, kind of like in the forefront, but what shifted was just realizing that, this isn't about me. This is about, sending the elevator back down. And the concept that I teach is really how I've been able to do what I've done, in 25 years of building and scaling. It's pretty crazy. Like even when I recount this story, Cody, like it doesn't even feel real.
Hard to believe at times, huh?
It is, yeah. My dad will remind me that it's absolutely real, but
I remember I was listening to you in a podcast with someone. You said something, and it just triggered because there's been this nonprofit my wife and I have supported over the years. It does. They go into prisons and they teach entrepreneurship to these people. And I remember the lady who started this. She said, most criminals are incredible entrepreneurs. They've just put their skills to the wrong use there. And you said something like that in there. But I think, going from that to then building and scaling these companies, I think even some of the things we're going to talk about buying back your time, you went through that classic phase that every, I'll say entrepreneur goes through, of where you were a great computer programmer building these companies, but then had to figure out how to like be a great, entrepreneur or CEO. And that was a big part of it. I know early on in the book, you talk about how, you're working 18, 19-hour days. I think you were engaged at the time. That didn't go so well. So maybe that's a long way of setting, like, what were the things that made you realize, like, hey, I've got to think differently about how I'm building and scaling these companies to where, I don't just destroy everything else in my life trying to build this company?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, and I think it's Kat who you're speaking about. I've been to the program that she runs in prisons.
Yep.
And I always, I speak to a lot of at-risk youth. That's what's been on my heart my whole life, to kind of work with the teenagers. And I always remind them this, like, if you could just find something you're passionate about that isn't illegal, I think you'll do really well. It's just because they have all the prerequisites of being an entrepreneur. The challenge is, and it doesn't matter if you've gone through, issues with the law or honestly vices. A lot of people that I work with have like severe, alcoholic tendencies, or, in the book, I call them the 5-time assassins.
Yep.
But what happened for me is like, I just wanted to be successful. And all I knew is I could not work for somebody else. It took me like 7 years to finally figure it out. And even when I did, I hired a coach, and this coach, Bob, gave me the playbook. So I was a technician, I was a programmer, I was writing code, but then he taught me the business side. The problem with that is you still take you to everything you do. And if you have, what I call emotional shrapnel that you're, or hand grenades you're throwing in your business, or, you get overloaded, or anxiety, whatever it is, like, entrepreneurship is a full contact sport. And I believe that your business will show you through people and circumstances where you are not free. Mm. It is actually the ultimate personal development program. And the company that finally succeeded, thanks to my coach, made me a millionaire. At 27, I became a cash millionaire, and then I exited the company a year later, and that set the foundation. But I didn't know how to actually enjoy life, or even build in a way that didn't create challenges in my life.
Yeah.
Like that company financially, yes, successful, but as you mentioned, I was engaged. She walked away from me. My brothers thought, I was distant. I was a horrible son to my parents. I wasn't a good friend. And that was like the whole realization, because it's hard until you make it, right? When people say it's not about the money, but it's not. And it's hard until you have the money to then go, oh crap, like the day before I didn't have the money and now I have the money and it turns out I'm still the same, anxiety prone, depressed, emotionally responsive, scarcity mindset. Like even a lot of people that have success can still have these underlying money mindset issues that keep them, time poor. I mean, that's the big concept. So it was moving to San Francisco and kind of like understanding how these entrepreneurs, these 20-some-year-olds, build and scale companies. I mean, you know some of these folks, they literally go from nothing to 100 million in revenue in 7 years, and it's like, well, how do they do it?
Yeah,
that set the framework for me, was understanding that, hey, if you have capital, and every business does, just different levels, there's only 4 ways to get leverage. There's the code, automation, software, today AI. There's content, which is SOPs, videos, training, content. This is content, right? Huge leverage. There's capital, right? Being able to like deploy capital to solve problems. I always like say, if you can solve a problem with money, it's not really a problem.
Yep.
And the fourth one's collaboration, which is people. Except most entrepreneurs don't understand how to work good with people, especially advisors. Like I actually work with a few advisors, and they're fascinating because the business model makes it really easy for them to not have to worry so much about the business side. They just work around the customer client management side, that they can get and build a really big book of business with annuities and be financially fairly well with a small team, if any team, honestly.
Yeah.
So when they start layering on and they want to scale and they've got other people on their team, that's when, again, it's, the business will show you where you're not free. And that is just learning to let go, right? And that's why I teach the buyback principle, which is we don't hire people to grow our business. We hire people to buy back our time, right? It's a calendar over capacity thing. And that's what the mistake is, because I think that most entrepreneurs end up building businesses they grow to hate. And that is truly the biggest destruction of wealth, is the entrepreneur deciding, I don't want to do this anymore. So they shut it down or they try to sell it, on a fire sale, when they just had to go through the process of understanding, hey, there's got to be a different way to build this business. And that's what I put forth in the book.
Let's go into, kind of the foundation of the book is the buyback principle. So, and I know you just kind of hit it, at a high level there, but let's dive a little into just the concept behind buyback principle, and maybe even talk about like, if someone was going to implement this, like what it looks like before, what it looks like after, what that process would look like.
I love that question. I appreciate you queuing me up, because it's obviously one of my favorite topics. My brother was a home builder. He ran into it. He hit what I call the pain line, right? Where he wanted to be successful. He had a couple projects. He thought, I'm supposed to swing a hammer. I'm supposed to do the real estate. I'm supposed to be on site. And I remember one time he called me and I went to his place, and it looked like he lost like 15 pounds and he was not eating and just stressed out. And so like all entrepreneurs will at some point hit a place where more growth equals pain.
Yep.
Right. And what I've learned is entrepreneurs will not grow into pain. If I held a knife to somebody's throat and said, step forward, their body wouldn't allow them to do it. So in that moment of growth equaling pain, a lot of entrepreneurs will make the mistake of saying, okay, well, I need somebody to design logos. I need another advisor. I need another, programmer. I need another marketing person to help me do the thing I do. But my argument is, financially, that's not the best trade, right? The best trade is to actually look at your calendar through the lens of two things. I look at time and energy.
Yeah.
What are the things that I'm doing today that has the lowest cost to pay somebody else to do, and that I, from an energetics point of view, don't want to do that I feel that sucks my energy versus give me energy. And if you do that over a 2-week period, and it's the first step that I teach, then you'll be able to identify the task list of things that are low cost and energy suckers to eventually give to somebody else. And it doesn't matter if you're a 9-figure CEO or a solopreneur. The process is the same. It's just different numbers. So that's why I say we want to work on the calendar first, not the capacity. Because if you do the calendar, you get the capacity. And this is truly how you build the business you don't grow to hate, is because the more you grow following this methodology, it's impossible for you not to get your time back. And
How?
that is the biggest thing that we all start company. I mean, the number one word when I ask an entrepreneur, why'd you start your business? The word they're going to say is freedom.
Yep.
Well, let's learn to play the game in a way that gets you there, because if not, you're going to end up at the top of this ladder of success and it's going to be leaning against the wrong wall, and it's self-inflicted.
It's funny talking to, being an entrepreneur. I have a lot of people who are thinking about starting the business come to me, who have good jobs that maybe work 40, 50 hours a week and say they want to be an entrepreneur because they want more freedom. I'm like, I don't think you understand what being an entrepreneur entails. Yeah, you can get there, but it ain't going to be that way right away. But one of the, maybe speak to this, and it's that idea of like, how do you prioritize what things to delegate or to get off to hire out? One of them, let me back up, and I'd just love you to speak to this a little. I say all the time, advisors are a great example of this, right? They're a really good advisor. We say all the time, our mission is to help good advisors become great business owners. And part of that is figuring out, how do you grow and scale this business outside of, you can build a great profitable business as an advisor without having to do that. But if you want some of that freedom, eventually you have to figure it out. A lot of them make the mistake. And here's why I'll say it. It's almost the comparison. They see our other biggest advisors who have 4 or 5 advisors working for them, and they think the magic is like, well, I just need to hire more advisors and get out of production. And one of the things I tell them all is like, that's the last thing you should do, right? The number one revenue generator, and typically the thing you're going to be best at, is converting prospective clients into clients for your firm. Like, outsource everything else, like service appointments, like hire someone to do the service appointments. It doesn't have to be really good at sales, or like you said, all those other aspects of the business, like delegate those. How would you prioritize that if you're an entrepreneur? Like, hey, and maybe some of that is like they're burnt out on that too. So that does happen. And sometimes they're like, man, I don't want to say feels like Groundhog's Day, but I'm meeting with people, hearing the same issues, the same concerns, putting similar plans together all day long. How do you balance that of like where your revenue is generated most heavily because of your skill set also?
Yeah, I love the question, Cody. Here's what I did, and I verified this with like probably 25 other, the world's top business coaches to kind of challenge my thinking. But when I was writing the book, and even prior to that, people would always say to me, well, what's the sequence, right? Like, what's the order to your question? Like,
yeah,
what thing
way.
should I focus on getting off my plate first? And like, how should I hire? So what I did is I sat down and I looked at not only my story, but all the thousands of entrepreneurs I've helped. And I thought, okay, if I had to distill it into a universal principle, how would it work? And I created this thing called the replacement ladder. And the replacement ladder is mathematically backed. In the book, I talk about the buyback formula that people can kind of run through to figure out what their buyback rate is. But essentially, this sequence is undisputable. This is the order that you should focus on to increase your revenue and earn the right to kind of build that freedom, right? Because like you said, when we start, I don't want a boss. You got a boss. It's your
Yeah.
it's your bank, it's your vendors, it's your partner. It's like you have bosses. So the first one is admin. And for me, it's inbox and calendar, right? So like level one, even if I was starting a business today, if I lost it all today, the first hire, I would borrow the money and I would go hire an administrative assistant. And the reason why is because anything that doesn't look like talking to customers and bringing people on and fulfilling for them is not productive.
Yeah.
You really should be spending all your time on that if it's day zero. So I would definitely start with the admin side, and I would get the inbox and calendar off my plate so that I can just be out there and doing meetings and conversing and networking. And that would be the first place I would spend time, buy back the time. The next level up is fulfillment or delivery, right? So, once you get a customer to enroll in you, that onboarding process, that customer support side, you can still be the person that reviews their files and, is involved in the strategy. But anything outside of that call should be grabbed by somebody else to watch the call, to grab the to-do list, to integrate, to contact, to get signatures, whatever that is, right? So that's the delivery side. Because again, if you think about admin's the lowest cost, those kind of tasks, if you have to hire somebody full-time to do it, it'd be the lowest cost salary. Then you go to delivery, right? Somebody that can support and understand the customers, but then you bought back all of that time. Then you work on marketing. And marketing is really about campaigns and traffic, like where, and for different businesses, it might be different if you're
Sure.
local. But it's really like build the system so that you have a repeatable, scalable, process for referrals, process for net new customers, and like where you're going, what are the events, design it, lock and load, and then have somebody else that can take this over and just make sure if you're the talent, if you still need to be the person on social media doing the podcast, that's great. But as soon as you're done, have somebody else deal with the whole thing, right? So that's marketing. So notice we still guys, you mentioned, we still got sales.
Yeah.
Sales is level 4, right, in the replacement ladder. Because the founder, if they have any success whatsoever, they're going to be the best person at selling. So you don't want to give that up too early when you can invest in other people to build those other engines of administrative tasks and fulfillment, delivery, and then marketing. But I'll tell you, I call this the flow stage, because the day you hire somebody to do kind of that part of selling, and all you just literally, this is the moment that every entrepreneur dreams of, is that I went on vacation and while I was gone, somebody else generated the lead, somebody else had the conversation, somebody else onboarded the customer, and then when I got back, I had stuff to do, but the whole machine went.
The nirvana. Yep. Yeah.
And it is, I mean, we're talking 4 hires. Right. And it's not crazy for some businesses. They order in the wrong sequence, and then they wake up and their calendar is just all red, all low value tasks. All the other team members they hired are doing the fun stuff. And they're just like, it's not what I signed up for.
Yep.
And the level 5 is leadership, right? As you know, that's where you start saying, okay, I need to hire people that own outcomes, not just projects. And you bring those people, and they're more senior and you have to pay them more. But that is kind of the replacement ladder in a nutshell, to help people focus. Like, do I have my admin? And I teach in the book, like, do you have this locked and loaded? Do you have this locked? And a lot of people have to fix the lower levels first before they can go back to the top. But I'll tell you this, you don't start with a COO. I mean, you probably see the same entrepreneur saying, I'm going to hire somebody to be my integrator. It's like you have 3 employees.
Yeah.
You don't have enough meat on the bones. This is not the first hire. How about you start with an assistant and learn the ropes, right? It's a lower risk, lower that's the training grounds, your dojo. So that's kind of my philosophy.
That's funny. We had an advisor, literally conversation last week. He said that, I feel like I need to hire a COO. I'm like, you have 8 employees. We didn't hire a COO till we had 175 employees. Like, you don't need a COO, right? Maybe you need a better operations person, but you don't need a COO. So you start to hire these people. Here's the other challenge. I'll admit, this was the hardest thing to overcome myself as an entrepreneur. I like to be involved in it. And I say all the time, when you start something and it's your baby and you're intimately knowledgeable about everything going on in the business, and then you start to hire and you have to give up some of that control, which is the only way you can really scale the business. That's a tough thing. It's probably the biggest challenge I see every advisor we work with go through as they're trying to scale. Is like, actually letting go of some of those. Like, great example, they'll hire other advisors and they're like, they're not as good as me. And I'm like, they shouldn't be, right? You have a lot more reps, but I use this example all the time, but I'm like, 3 of them at 70% of you is 210% of your output, right? So it's still, the math works. How do you let go? Like, I know challenge for you probably at some time too, but just any tips around that as you're hiring these people in?
Yeah, I that was probably the biggest thing that I had to overcome in my late 20s.
It's so tough.
So tough, because your personal reputation's on the line, right? And there's nothing that hurts more, like viscerally, the feeling in your gut to find out a customer's unhappy because somebody else did something and they didn't even mean to do it. And in hindsight, you're like, oh, I didn't train them right, or I forgot to check in on this, or what did I miss, or I didn't set the expectations. And it's those are the moments that you either grow through or you go through and don't learn the lesson. So I had to figure out, I had like 30 employees at one point and they all reported to me. I didn't understand the idea of leadership and management and, direct reports. So I felt the pain in a big way. And what I have learned is a few things. To your point, actually, what I love to share with people is 80% done by somebody else is 100% freaking awesome. So that's number one. Every hour that I'm not at my desk and I'm spending time with my kids or going to the gym or reading a book to kind of elevate my skills, and somebody else in my life is taking over and moving dreams and goals forward, that is awesome. And if I think they should do it at 100%, I'm delusional. So right off the gate, to your point, How about we just lower our expectations for other people because they are not us, nor do they have perfect information and context that's in our mind. So that's just an unrealistic expectation. Then we got to talk about the ownership of our people, because I have a philosophy that we build the people and the people build the business, right? So like I have entrepreneurs that I coach and they say to me, they're like, I'm frustrated with my team. And I go, tell me about it. And they walk me through the scenario. And I said, let's make a list of all your frustrations. And they go, okay, well, they don't participate in meetings. I don't feel like they're taking risk. They're spending too much money, like whatever it is. I said, make the whole list. Let's go, dump it out. Boom, 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 boom. Then I asked them a simple question. Show me in your calendar where you've actually taught them your philosophy behind these frustrations. And they go, what? And I go, show me in your calendar where you taught them how to participate in meetings, how to take risk, how to be more prudent on budgets and spending. They're like, well, I hired them. They should know better. Hey, here's what I know. I own my people. If I hired them, they're on my team. And I just think it's fascinating to watch CEOs spend more time trying to get new customers and develop their markets instead of developing their teams and investing in their people. So that's like one of the big ideas that I think is like, I can let go more knowing that, I do leadership training every Monday. I facilitate it for my media company. I love it. I love going in there. I make a list. I've got like the next 6 weeks dialed out. And every week I consider it as an opportunity. We record it, right? It's camcorder method. I teach it in my book.
Yep.
And then it's part of the SOPs for onboarding. So it's kind of like every time I teach something new around our philosophies of being on our team, I know the next person that joins the team, I don't have to train them. They get to watch the onboarding videos and go through that leadership training. So I think that's one of the big ideas. And then the other one is the idea of what I call transformational leadership versus transactional leadership. So most entrepreneurs, including myself, when I started off, I didn't know any better. So when people started working for me, I would tell them what to do. I'd check that it got done, and then I'd tell them what to do next. And I don't know, that sounds like delegating. That sounds like letting go. And what happens typically at about 12 to 15 people on your team, if you're operating that way, you hit a wall where you wake up in the morning with your to-do list and your projects, and you're like, I'm going to have a productive day. And then the first person reaches out because they got an issue. The other person reaches out because they have fire. And you spend the whole day just making sure that all those people are doing the right things and they're pulling on the rope in the same directions, and they're not making any big mistakes. And by the time the day gets going, like it's already 6 p.m. So then I remember I used to like work from 8 to midnight just to do the stuff I had to do because I was so busy managing the people.
Yep.
My philosophy today, transformational leadership, is completely different. I start with the outcome. And the outcome is describing what it looks like when it's done at the highest level, right? Just not telling them how to do the job. Just say, when this problem is solved, it will feel and look like this. That's the outcome. Second is we negotiate the measurement. Like, hey, when we solve this is the current problem, and here's how we know there's a problem. When this is solved, these things are going to be true. This is what green looks like. So we talk about the numbers. And then the third part, and this is the coaching part, which is investing in the people, is I do my one-on-ones and I have a list of things I want to talk to them about. So if I see anything that's happening, this is a hard one for folks.
Yeah.
I think it's important to understand what is the difference between a dumpster fire and a kitchen fire, right? Cody, you know this. Like, people come to you, there's always something on fire, but can we just first, like, is this dumpster and it eventually, like, it's contained, it's not perfect, but there's no business in the world that doesn't have issues? Or is this like, we got to get involved and solve this? So my whole thing is, if I see something that's done wrong, as long as it's not a kitchen fire, I just write it down. I have a note file on my phone that's got everybody's name, my direct reports. And then on our next one-on-one, the first question they ask me is, what's on your list, Dan? And I pull it up and I go, hey, last Tuesday I saw in Slack this message got sent, and just want to get your thoughts on that. Well, blah, blah, blah. And that's my opportunity to coach
them up. Yeah.
And that is the whole thing. I think people say, praise in public, criticize in private. That's how I've done it. And I did not do that before. Like when I was in my late 20s, it was real time, in public, on meetings. It was not my best work. But now, using that framework, again, I teach in the book, it's allowed me to, now I hire CEOs to run companies, right? Like, it's allowed me to build companies with partners and for them to feel super supported, but not criticized, because when we show up and they go, what's on your list? I've got some really thoughtful things that I've seen that I just invite them to consider. And that's kind of the language I use. I don't tell them what to do, because if I'm telling them what to do, then I'm doing their job. I just say, hey, I'd love to invite you to consider these ideas.
The reason I thought this would be a great conversation after I started reading your book is I'm like, this is the conversation I have with so many advisors. I think any entrepreneur, so many of those things, you talked about it. We always say there was a period in our business, probably 5 or 6 years in, there were 3 of us as founders, which that helped, right? We were able to divide up some, but even early on, we would like always huddle to make a decision. And same thing, we just became the bottleneck where everybody would come to us for everything and nothing would move forward till the 3 of us could get together and talk about it and decide it. And that was that big change, is how do you get yourself out of that and empower your team? But then something else you said there at the end on the transformational leadership that it's taken me a long time to learn too, is that I think a lot of times is, let's just say that the owner of the firm, or the leader, it maybe is a better word. I don't think I always understood the weight that my words carried. And I think that's something I had to learn over time. It's like, I was just like, hey, here's what I think, but not considering how other people take that. And I think the way you said that, of like using that in one-on-one to coach around that versus just there's probably plenty of times you could have addressed it and called it out and it would not have gone over as well, or really impacted probably their ability to grow and learn from it. So that's I really like that one.
Yeah, I got that from one of my coaches, guy Jason. He said to me once, he goes, Dan, you have to remember everything you do is seen through a microscope and everything you say is heard through a megaphone.
Wow, that's good.
Yeah. The microscopes and megaphones. Like, you got to be very careful what you say when you say it, because I had this bad habit. I don't know, Cody, you and I we like to create. We talk out loud when we're thinking, right? So we're like, hey, Bob, what do you think of this? And they're like, oh, yeah, you can do this, this, and this. And then you walk away thinking you just like were ideating and playing with stuff. And all of a sudden they heard it. Like, that's the new priority for Q2. And you're like, whoa, hey, who said that? You're like, oh, my office. So I again, all these lessons are hard learned.
I always had a bad habit. What hit me, I think Hal Elrod too. And I don't know how long ago this was, 7, 8, 9 years ago. I sent that email that Hal suggests sending, at the end of his book. And mine was, I remember someone said it very clearly. They're like, because I am a pretty creative person, it's what I enjoy doing the most. They're like, when you think it's a stupid idea, like, it's pretty obvious to everybody in the room that you thought it was a stupid idea, and so it shuts down anyone wanting to say anything, because they're afraid, like, the way your mind thinks, like, if you don't like it. So just those things do matter. I love the microscopes and megaphones. I'm going to take that and use that a lot from now on. You talked about this earlier, and I just want you to hit, there was an example I heard you share in a different podcast. You talk about the 5 time assassins. We won't have time to go through all of them, but one you talked about was the saver. And I heard you using the example of, the guy that had a $2 million business and wouldn't hire the $10,000 coach that had helped you like solve the exact problem he was going through. Maybe at a high level, just talk about, if that's one, the saver like is one, that may be one just to hit on the idea of these time assassins that a lot of entrepreneurs have.
Yeah. The one thing I wanted to give everybody was the framework to think through their existing life without spending a dollar, where they were creating lack of time, right? Like, that's why I call them the time assassins. You don't have to spend a dollar to solve some of these issues because they're self-inflicted, right? And you talked about the saver. I mean, I see people all the time walk over dollars to pick up pennies, like all the time, where, my software background's given me a unique lens on the world because I studied manufacturing. So software development and collaborative teams contributing to the same code base is similar to like how you build a car, where you have all these vendors that come together and, hundreds of thousands of parts have to kind of be assembled in the right sequence, in the right order. Software is the same thing. So one of the concepts that I learned earlier on was the theory of constraints, TOC. And anytime I analyze a business, if either I'm buying it or I'm coaching somebody, I'm always looking at what is the current constraint for throughput. And what's fun about it is that if you actually understand your business and you look at those choke points, the investment to solve the choke point versus the ROI, they're disproportionate. I mean, they're 10x, 100x sometimes, where, like in this case you mentioned, my friend comes to me, he's got a $2 million a year business, and he's just having a hard time producing the thing. And I go, oh, well, I worked with this guy, Simon, just hire him. And he goes, well, how much is he? I said, well, I don't know. Maybe I got a good deal, but he's around 10 grand or something like that. And he goes, does he have a book? And I said, I don't think so. But why do you need a book? He's like, well, maybe I should start with his book. And I go, but that won't solve the problem. Like just deploy the capital, because his alternative, he told me, I'm thinking of shutting it down.
Yeah.
I'm like, but you're profitable. He's like, yeah, we're about 40% like net profit. I said, and again, this is one of those examples where I think entrepreneurs are emotional about their spend. They're emotional about their time and the dollars, right? Because, it makes sense. So one of my rules that I give clients that might help your listeners is you got to go from absolutes to percentages. You know what I'm saying, Cody? And you probably run into this in business. Like when you start off, it's $10, it's $100, it's $1,000. And those are big numbers, right? If you have I had a $20,000 phone overage once, and that really hurt. Like, I don't want to be I went to Haiti, and it's like, oh, I thought I had a package. It turned out I didn't. But at certain points, numbers have to be they have to be rewritten into percentages, because as a percentage, it's not an absolute. Like whether it's 10 grand, it's 10 grand might have been a lot when you started off, but if you're at 2 million in revenue, that's a small percentage of your total income. So I think that's one of the tools that I give my clients to understand how to overcome the saver mentality, the assassin, because they think, well, I gotta mind every dollar. It's like, yes, but as a percentage, you have to also invest to unlock new revenue streams or throughput. And sometimes you don't look at the problem through the right lens.
Yeah, when I read that and then I heard you talking about it, I see a lot that aren't willing to make those investments into the business. And some of that, if you bootstrap a business, like you did have to watch what you're doing and overcoming that. Okay, I want to ask one final question before we jump to just these lightning round questions to make sure we get done on time. So here's a conversation I have a lot, especially over, I'd say the last 3 years, a really common one. Our advisors, we're helping them live out that mission we talk about, helping them become a good business owner. It's freeing up a lot of time. They're moving up into this like CEO role. A lot of them not even seeing clients anymore. They start to ask what the heck they should do with their time, right? So I try to tell them, and I heard you say something about like, hey, here's the 3 most important roles as a CEO. But sometimes they start to struggle with like, man, if I've got too much time on my hands, I almost mess the business up because I'm bored. So maybe just talk to like, as you free your time up, one, maybe as a CEO, where should you be investing that time? But then just any other thoughts you have on like, as you free up time, how do you not go screw your business up because you're bored and looking for something to do too?
As a coach, it's the funnest thing for me to help people through.
Yeah.
If you do it right, it can be one of the biggest force multipliers of value creation in a business.
Yeah.
And if you do it wrong, like you said, you could become literally the problem that stops your team from winning.
You start to annoy them. They're like, oh God, he's in the office today.
Or they're like worried what you're reading because you're going to come in and change everything, right?
Yeah.
So like back in the day, my team would be like, what book are you reading? So we can trace ourselves. But my philosophy is this. First off, every CEO, like true CEOs, if you've got a team and you're the CEO, you got to be focused on these 3 things. The first thing is vision, right? So most businesses don't take the time, and you may have it as a CEO, but you've never communicated it, right? So the best book on this is The Vivid Vision by Cameron Herold. And creating that kind of that future place and being incredibly descriptive. I always tell my clients, to the degree that you have 100% clarity, 100% belief, 100% of the time, you will pull that future into your reality. And that's that philosophy. So some people might have lost their vision. AI comes out, well, how does this affect our business? And I would say that's what your job is live 18 months into the future, look around the corner, go to the conferences, but have a clear vision and communicate it. Cody, as you know, you almost have to be obnoxious about it, where you just repeat it and repeat it and repeat it and still repeat it. And when you think you're done and everybody knows it, tell them again, because you're going to say it in a different way where they go, oh, now I get it. Okay. So that's vision. Second one is people. I think, as I mentioned, we build the people build the business. So I always say talent acquisition, talent retention, and talent development. Like some people have never realized that there's only 2 engines to build in a business. There's a customer engine and there's a talent engine. And if those things come together at the same time, you have a machine that can scale. It's just most people keep hitting the bottleneck because they haven't built that talent people function in their business. So that's a big area. And then the third is money, right? Is understanding how does capital flow through the business? Where are those constraints? How do you deploy the resources to unlock those, to create breakthroughs? And then, so let's say you did all that. What I would tell people is there's a core frame that changes when you actually get to scale. And that is that you are no longer the doer, you are the talent. Okay. And what I mean by that is you get to a place, and I would invite everybody to consider this, where you show up in service of your team. So I don't have any work products I'm responsible for, but I make myself available to the team to ask of me to help them with things, right? So if my head of coaching is like, hey, could you do a framework on how we run our events? Yes, I'll put that in my calendar. So the big thing for me is realizing that, even though I'm the CEO and I'm responsible for the business, if I've hired great leadership in place, I got to empower them to actually own their departments. They still get to report, their outcomes or measurement, and I'm going to coach them. But then I got to transition my time to be more talent for the organization. And then it's a negotiation with my leaders on how I deploy that time. So I'm not pushing on them, they're pulling from me.
Yeah.
And that's what shifts. So if I've got the vision, the people, and the money figured out, then it's how does the team pull from me? And that is sometimes a prompt. That's at the beginning of the meeting saying, hey, I'm not going to tell you guys what to do. I want you guys to tell me what you need from me.
Yep.
That relationship changes the whole thing and allows CEOs to actually feel useful without being harmful.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. I appreciate you sharing that. Okay, let's jump into the lightning round questions because I know we got a hard stop. So just 5 quick questions, can be short answers, but going back to COVID, I think made people reevaluate, what they thought they knew. But is there a lesson that you've learned over the past few years that you think you'll carry forward for the rest of your life?
Yeah, I mean, just the way I am with people, because COVID obviously made it really tough to see folks. So I've just doubled down on my, we just talked about, we have mutual friends, and I just did a ski trip with 48 incredible entrepreneurs. I now organize a mountain bike trip with our mutual friend, Brad. And I think that's the big thing that I've just doubled down on. I've always been fairly, love people, love to organize things, but I've just, started saying yes to more things. Like we're going to go to Dubai with the family. We're going to go to Australia at the end of the year. So I've just, the quality time with other people that I admire and that I really enjoy spending time, those have become more yeses than no's, because before I was a little bit more indexed towards just my own stuff. And I'm realizing, as we all saw, like at any point,
never know.
that could be taken from us.
Yeah, that's good. So, although you got to keep Brad from wrecking, man, on all those mountain bikes. It's like every time we're together, he's broke something else.
Him flying through the air like a squirrel because he decided to launch his snow bike off a tree and it catapulted him. He's my spirit animal. Like I watch him and I go, how do you do this as a grown man with grown kids? And he's charging harder than the teenagers.
He is. I love it. Okay.
Second question. What's the one thing, and we've probably talked about it to some degree, but maybe a little more specific, that you did that graduated you from being a good leader to a great leader?
The biggest thing is focusing on the standards I held myself to. It's standards. Like I realized that we don't rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our standards. And I've just over the years said, this is how I'm going to show up. It's the law of the lid, right? Like no business will grow past the development of the leader. But what I've done over the years is not only have I defined my standards for different aspects of my life, I share them publicly. So anybody that follows me on Instagram will quickly see, oh, these are the things that Dan believes in, that he shares. So that would be the thing, because what I've learned is putting out those standards in regards to my health and my work and my intentionality. It then allows my team, I put it all on social media. It allows my team to consume that if they want, and then understand how to interact with me. And that's probably made me way better. I feel like that was the moment I went from amateur leader, and I did pretty well in business.
Yeah.
But to go pro, that was the big shift.
That's cool. I love it.
Third question. I know you're a personal development junkie, just listening to you and the groups and stuff that you read, but is there something this year you're doing around your personal growth and development that's maybe new or exciting for you?
There's so much. I actually have it right here, but it's called the Mendy. And this is a brain training device. So there's an app on my phone. and essentially it works enhancing the electronic firing of your your prefrontal cortex. So what happens for me, I don't know about you, Cody, but like, I'd be in a meeting and I just forget these little details. But what was happened for me as a professional speaker, a communicator, a content creator, is my ability to pull vocabulary is a non-negotiable. So I would say there's two things that I want to give your audience. You guys are getting some stuff I don't share. The Mendy device, and then also NMN. So there's this vitamin or molecule called NMN. It's a precursor to NAD+. I used to do the NAD+ drips, and both of those almost have brought my brain to a level of not limitless, but it's pretty awesome. Cool. Where I'm remembering details and I'm working at, programming the myelin and firing kind of the memory and the mental game. And for me at my level, that's my day. I need to be able to communicate at the highest level.
That's cool. Love it. Okay. Fourth question. Can't be your book. They should go buy it, but it can't be that. The one book that you've recommended most other entrepreneurs?
Easily Think and Grow Rich. I mean, it's the entrepreneurial Bible in many ways, but I'll go deeper on that. I actually use ChatGPT to ask what are the books referenced in Think and Grow Rich, and it was written in 1938. And over the last 2 years, I've only read books written before 1938 because I figured, I just wanted to study the greats that influenced the great. Yeah. And it's been a really fun journey, but that would be the book I recommend the most.
Ironically, Brad and I were on a text string with the group we have, and this year I decided I'm just going to go back and read classics, right? So Think and Grow Rich, just some of those. How to Win Friends, all those. And so kind of we had a group chat going of like, what would you put on that list? So that's a good one. Okay, final question. The best piece of advice you've ever received would be what?
The essence of it is this: you're here to become the best version of yourself, essentially the person you needed most in your darkest days, and to share that person with the world.
That's good.
And that's what I wake up every day to do. And I think every human actually is here to do that. And I honor that.
Well, you're doing it well, and it's pretty. We didn't even get into how you're going back and spending a lot of time with youth that had a similar upbringing to you. So pretty cool to watch. So I appreciate the time today, Dan. How can people follow along, stay connected with you? I know you're on social media a lot. You have a ton of content actually out there. So share the different ways that they can connect with you and follow along.
Buybackyourtime.com is the best place to get the book, and we'll redirect you to the Audible or the Kindle. It's available on Amazon. I would say Instagram is my favorite because not only do I put out a ton of content, if you message me and like for your listeners, if they want my internal like SOP for dealing with my executive assistant, they just message me, Cody, or this podcast name. I'll personally send you a direct link to Google Doc, no opt-in, no nothing. It's just a gift. But Dan Martell, 2 L's of Martell, is my Instagram, and that's where I'm at on all social channels. And we got a pretty big following on YouTube and LinkedIn and Twitter and all that stuff.
Yeah, pretty big. So
even TikTok, and I'm not dancing in a crop top. I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah. Well, you'll have to send me that video, Brad, so I can give him a hard time. I'm going to see him in May. So it'll be good. So
I appreciate the time, Dan. For everyone who listens, go share this. It's what so many of us entrepreneurs go through. And I know there's a ton of value you added today to our group. So I appreciate you.
It's an honor. Thanks, Cody.